Before I launch straight into today's Best Picture, I do want to address the elephant in the room, and that is that I have maybe let this lapse just a little moment or two longer than I wanted to. That's frustrating. I'm bothered by it. Let's pick this apart really quickly. I really like to pay attention to these films and make notes about them, but that can be quite the process. And then rewording those notes into some sort of semblance of sanity is even harder. So that bit just takes a while. But you know what I really struggled with before this time was picking a best picture to watch. And perhaps going forward, I just need to do like a lucky dip, some sort of tombola bingo thing. I want to make decisions that feel like I'm covering ground from different eras, but also I don't want to do 10 films that feel the same in tone. It's really, really tricky. But I did come to the decision that I want to do a 90s film, and there are a couple of 90s films which I don't particularly like. So I wanted to go for one that I had a more positive impression of, and that was Forrest Gump. I do think prior to this watch, I thought that Forrest Gump was a great film. It was one that I remember going, oh, I have to watch this. It seems like everyone in the world has watched this. It is in everybody's vocabulary, and it wasn't in mine. So I gave it a go, and I thought it was great. What really caught me off guard was that I'd somewhat put it off because of its runtime. I thought it was bordering on 3, perhaps post 3 hours, right? So I was not sure about attacking this one, but I then did my research, my homework, and discovered it was only 2 hours and 20. So I thought that was much more of a manageable sandwich to bite into. Forrest Gump in a nutshell. Now, Forrest Gump follows what feels like an entire lifetime of a man as he battles through various adversities to track down the love of his life, is how I see it. What is crazy is that it's not a lifetime. It is merely 40, potentially pushing 50 years of this man's life, but it feels like forever. Before I properly get into my rundown through this Best Picture winner, I do just want to stress that this is merely 2 hours and 20 of this man's biopic. We could be awaiting a Forrest Gump 2 at some point. Oh God, I fear that I've wished that into existence. Let's rush past that and hope that that doesn't happen. But let's have a look at what I thought about this film. So this was nominated for 13 Oscars, but it only won 6, winning for visual effects, editing, and adapted screenplay. And then also for Best Actor, Tom Hanks, who I think was very, very worthy. Best Director for Robert Zemeckis, which is, it's not to say that he is not one of the greats. He absolutely deserves it for the style of film that he creates. They are great. But I'm not quite sure if this is my favourite Robert Zemeckis film. But I wasn't voting. I'd go for Back to the Future before this. Personally, I love Death Becomes Her. And of course, Best Picture. And this was also the second highest grossing film of the year, only behind The Lion King, which I think is quite the achievement, really. Okay, so we kick off the film following a famously spiritual white feather falling to the ground, and it falls next to Forrest Gump, who's sat on a bench and is telling this poor woman next to him all about his life story. Now, this poor woman must have the patience of a saint. She is just trying to read her People magazine in a bit of peace, sat outside on a bench on a lovely day waiting for her bus. But no, Forrest is bloody chewing her ear off. So where else to begin but childhood? Yes, the very beginning of it all. And it's made apparent to us very quickly that Forrest is having to overcome adversities from a very young age. He's got braces on his legs. The school don't want to know about him. But luckily, he's got a very defiant mother in Sally Field who will not take no for an answer. So much so, she will drop her knickers and sleep with a head teacher to keep his place at school. Mother of the year. And in amongst this, we have a very bizarre moment where the house they live in becomes a guest house and Elvis comes to live with them and Forrest Gump teaches Elvis how to dance. Bizarre. What's even more bizarre is that isn't even the most unbelievable moment in this film. Hold on to your hats. Okay, so this is where I must stress that Forrest will narrate everything and then that thing that he's just said will happen. This becomes very tiresome very quickly. In the first of what feel like 1,000 miracles in this film, Forrest takes his place on the school bus. The only person that will let Forrest sit beside them is Jenny. They develop a very firm friendship, and she is the person that famously tells Forrest to run, Forrest, run. And he does. He does just that, so much so that his leg braces bloody fall off. And I'm not even joking. There are clouds of dust following his running trails as he runs through the fields of wheat. So then we move to college, where everybody on the football team loves him. Now, here is where there are some examples of the civil rights movement sort of seeping into Forrest's storyline. I have to admit, he doesn't really do anything about it. I was a little bit unimpressed by that moment in the film, and I wasn't quite sure what it was saying other than it was happening. Maybe I missed the point. Forrest is then so good at American football that he is invited to be part of the national football team. Not just that, he's then invited to the White House to meet JFK, as you do. Hilariously, at this point, this didn't faze me too much. I was just like, okay, whatever, sure. What I was more interested in was that this man can drink 15 Dr. Peppers in one sitting, which I am so envious of, as Dr. Pepper is maybe my favourite drink in the entire universe. I would love the ability to just inhale 15 Dr. Peppers in that fashion. I'm so jealous. What next for Forrest after college? Somehow this man has joined the army. There's an awful lot of repetition in this film. We see that Forrest joins the bus and again has that moment of there's nowhere to sit. Much like when he met Jenny originally on the school bus, he's now meeting Bubba. And Bubba keeps him very well entertained all throughout army training through tales of cooked shrimp. And why not? That sounds delicious. I don't like shrimp. So we're hopping back and forth to Jenny throughout this film. We stick with Forrest, it's his story, but we do have glimpses of Jenny back and forth throughout this film. So we're back with Jenny now, who it turns out has been let go of college for some nude modelling scandal and is now performing as a club singer who also happens to be nude in a bar somewhere. Forrest goes to visit her at the bar and watches some interaction where there's a pervert in the audience who's being a little too much for Jenny. Forrest decides to intervene. Argument ensues. Jenny can stand up for herself. She's a strong woman. Forrest is a kind soul and just wants to help. Outside, Jenny announces that she's had enough and she can't do this anymore. Forrest tells her that he's off to Vietnam. This leaves Jenny in a little bit of shock, but not enough to stop her from leaving. She does allow him one more fabulous piece of advice before she goes, the font of all knowledge that she is, and that is, if he's ever afraid, to just keep running. We get to Vietnam because Forrest's there and he meets his leader, Dan Taylor, who is has quite an ego on him. He's quite brash, quite loud, a little arrogant, but maybe it's just confidence. And Forrest is game for anything. He'll climb into holes. He'll wade through treacherous waters. And he's even planning a little business adventure on the side with Bubba for when they both leave Vietnam. Back at home, Jenny appears to have joined the Mamas and the Papas, some sort of hippie band like that. Marvellous. But then tragedy strikes. There are Apocalypse Now style bombings going on left, right and centre all around them. And Forrest goes into panic mode. He starts running. But he starts putting that running to good use and goes and starts to rescue some of the lads. Unfortunately, he does find Bubba in quite a terrible state. And Forrest shares a really emotional moment where Bubba gives his last words to him, which are, "I don't want to go." That's Doctor Who. Where his last words are, "I want to go home." That might be my standout moment of the film. It was actually very, very moving, the interaction between the two of them. And we fast forward again. After being shot in his posterior, we now discover that Forrest is in a hospital bed next to newfound double amputee Dan. It's here where we discover that Forrest has yet another special talent. Ping pong. He's mostly playing himself, but that does not stop him from being a right little Marty Supreme. He's even playing in his sleep. More unbelievable action ensues, where Forrest returns back home to accept the Presidential Medal of Honor from Lyndon B. Johnson. This is where he becomes embroiled in some sort of anti-war protest at the Capitol, despite him being in full sort of military uniform. I don't want to get too much into this, but there is a brief reunion with Jenny here, where she then seemingly runs off to join the Manson family. It was all a bit hazy to me. I didn't really get that part. His ping pong career, which is somehow still attached to the army, then takes him to China in the name of ping pong and also world peace. Okay, maybe this is actually my favourite moment of the film, because he then appears as some sort of huge celebrity on the Dick Cavett show next to, and I'm not joking, John Lennon, who apparently can only speak using the lyrics of the song Imagine. There's then another trip to the White House. He seemingly uncovers Watergate. There's a reunion with Dan. There's a lot going on at kind of a rapid speed here, right? And he's released from the army and his ping pong career comes to an end. The film then takes a horrifying turn for me because Forrest buys what I can only describe as one of my seriously big fears in life, and that is a big wooden ship. This big boat so that he can go shrimp catching like he and Bubba talked about. But this wasn't just a stressful endeavour for me because it was also quite stressful for him. He had no idea what he was doing. Luckily, by some sort of serendipity, he encounters Dan upon a dock who then, and there's this fabulous joke about him having sea legs. Lovely. But more stress will ensue because, honey, there is a big storm coming. Hurricane Carmen leaves destruction everywhere she goes, except for one shipping boat. And I bet you can guess whose it is. Yes, this bloody hurricane, this madam, the destruction that she causes allows Forrest and Dan to catch all of the shrimp because they're the only bloody ones catching it. These actions lead to the Bubba Gump Shrimp Corporation, which makes them millionaires. Yet another bloody miracle. So at this point, I'm not really sure how old Forrest is, but he's given the news whilst aboard the ship that his mother is dying and he has to go home. There's nowhere to run. He just jumps overboard and starts swimming. If you can't run, swim, I guess. He goes home and sadly, Sally Field passes away. Very, very emotional. And I quite like that Sally Field character. She kept all of his press cuttings. She had all the merchandise. She was doing some good business deals. She knew how he could make even more money. Very savvy. What a woman. Underrated hero of this film. Shortly after this, Jenny comes back into his life yet again. And thinking this must be it now, she's come back to him, he asks her to marry him. And guess what? The little bitch declines. She says, "You don't want to marry me." But the lady doth protest too much because mere moments later, she is in his bed. They're shagging. But the little minx leaves the next morning without even a whiff of a goodbye. What else can a bereft Forrest do? Well, he has to take the advice that Jenny gave him in the first place. He dons his cap and he starts running and running and running. Running through mountains, running through beaches, running through fields of wheat. He's like a little Theresa May. He gains media attention along this route and becomes this cult-like figure. He runs so far that he finally catches up with where we were at the beginning of this story and where we keep intercutting to throughout. And that's sat on this bloody bench. Forrest has chewed the ears off various different people throughout this film, but there's this elderly lady at the end who has stuck with him for some time now. She handily points him in the right direction of where he's going. He needs no bus, he can use his legs. It's just one block over, and that's to Jenny's house. But you didn't think that he'd go and meet Jenny and it would all be plain sailing, did you? Because I didn't. I knew that this little minx had more bombshells up her sleeve, and not one, but two. She's got a son and it's his. It's like an episode of Jerry Springer. And then she drops the second bombshell. She's dying and nothing can be done for her. So what happens? Well, Forrest, being the absolute saint that he is, takes her back to the house, takes his kid with him and marries her and gives her a very beautiful and meaningful end of life that she probably did not deserve. He's a far better man than I am. Jenny finally tells him that she loves him and then passes away, just as Forrest finally gets what he's been dreaming of. This film does end with a lovely scene where Forrest ushers his little son, Forrest Jr., onto the bus. And it's very reminiscent of a scene that happened very early on in the film. And that does happen quite a lot. Let's go through a couple of my thoughts because it was far too difficult to sort of intercept them to that rundown. The soundtrack is great. There are so many fantastic pieces of music in this film. Bloody brilliant songs. Some things happen over and over and over again, and it does become a little tedious, very repetitive, and you do find yourself on the brink of tearing your hair out because you just want something different to happen. This is a story of persistence though, and that is incredibly inspiring. From the actions of his mother early on to get Forrest the opportunities that he deserved, to him not taking no for an answer, or not being ridiculed in the military training, and he keeps fighting for Jenny. He doesn't take no for an answer. It is a little bit of an attack on the senses. I did really love it, but there is a lot to think about, and it does kind of move at the speed of light. You do have to keep your wits about you to remember what's going on, where they are, who they're with, why she's doing that now. There's a lot going on. Forrest is a good narrator, but he does then spend his time just showing you what he's just told you, which makes you sometimes feel like you've watched the same thing twice, and in some cases you have. Everything is Forrest in this film. Yes, Jenny is a pivotal character here, but we're not following her story. We just catch glimpses of it. It's all about Forrest. You have to be with him, and if you're not going to like this film. It's as easy as that. It's occasionally far-fetched. Now, do I expect this from a Robert Zemeckis film? Yes. It is a little saccharine, but I don't mind that. Actually, it was quite refreshing to know that the voters went for this. I think anybody could watch this film. And I'm going to say, I think they should. Because I think that you could probably do with a good background knowledge of the 20th century, especially American 20th century history, whilst going into this film, because it touches on many, many different points. Various presidents, the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War. I would even hazard a guess, as it's got some sort of commentary on the rise of the television star. There were certainly moments where I started writing down in a different list things that I wanted to brush up on afterwards. Had I done my research in advance, whether I'd have felt more comfortable watching the film, or is it just nice sometimes to look at things, question them, and then take them away after to do your research? I quite enjoy that. It makes me think of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because I watched that film, had loads to think about afterwards, went home, looked up what was real, what wasn't. I enjoyed that. It made me think about it for quite some time. And I can't deny I've been thinking about Forrest Gump for some time since as well. I think what I really love about this film is that it's a totally different type of epic. You think of epic and you think Ben-Hur, Lawrence of Arabia, the Ten Commandments, but this is a heavy thing to think about. There's a lot touched on, a lot of different themes, a lot of different ethical questions posed here that you have to think about as you watch this film. There's a heavy weight attached to it, but it's also digestible. The colours are bright, the language is light, and the characters are played perfectly well, particularly Sally Field and Tom Hanks. They do a fantastic job of selling this script. I'm never bored watching this film. I have my gripes with it. I have my concerns. There's things that I don't quite get why those decisions and choices were made. I think it's very special. Okay, I'm going to quickly run down the other nominees. Right, bottom of the list, I'm putting Four Weddings and a Funeral. All 5 of these films would be worthy Best Picture winners. I'd say this is probably the least worthy of the 5, but I love that there's a Richard Curtis film here. It does have one hell of a cast. It's brilliant. I have a very love-hate relationship with Richard Curtis, and this isn't one of my favourite of his works, but it is very good. At 4th place, I'm putting Quiz Show, another fantastic movie which I absolutely adore. One hell of a cast, great performances. The script is very good. Again, an incredible year for Best Picture nominees, and so I'm really splitting hairs here. I'm going to put Forrest Gump 3rd, just because I think there's a little bit more weight attached to the first 2, which I think give them bigger Best Picture energy. But again, I think it earned its place. It's very, very good. 2 is Pulp Fiction, one of Quentin Tarantino's easily best films. Something I didn't get very much until rewatching it in the cinema a few years ago, and I thought, wow, this is a masterpiece. Samuel L. Jackson is, of course, phenomenal. But I'm always just taken aback at John Travolta's versatility. That man has also played Danny Zuko in Grease and Edna Turnblad in Hairspray, and look at him there. He's amazing. The whole film is great, and what a clever and witty script. Brilliant. They all are. My God, this is such a great year for Best Pictures. And number 1, The Shawshank Redemption. Now, talk about an epic. That is one hell of a film, and probably was robbed of a Best Picture win there. I can see why Forrest Gump won over these. It's well deserving of the Best Picture title. I think, as I said before, it's a different type of epic. It touches on so much. It pulls on, I would guess, American voters' heartstrings, because it is a very moving take on American life in the latter half of that century. It's still just about believable. There are some things that are incredibly far-fetched. Interesting subtlety to what it's saying, that messaging about gun violence. JFK was shot, John Lennon was shot, Reagan was shot at. It's a very intelligent way of getting your point across. It's like wrapping up a tablet in some ham to give to a dog. That's what I think about that. My ranking, I'm actually going to bump this up to 2nd place out of the 6 that we've seen so far. I actually kind of can't believe that I'm saying this, and I really thought that I liked this less than I did the others. But there's something about it that just ticks so many boxes for me that perhaps some of these other films don't. It's not Broadway Melody levels of amazing for me. I'm so thrilled that I've discovered that film. Have you seen Forrest Gump? I'm sure you have. It seems like everybody in the world has seen this film. What did you think of it? Let me know in the comments below. I am thinking about doing a potluck for the next one. But if you've got something that you're desperate for me to see, let me know and I'll probably give it a go. So like, comment and subscribe to the channel. There's loads on there. I'm updating it as often as I can and I'm really enjoying doing so. So please come aboard and join me next time for another Best Picture ranking.